Now comes the very basic of Azure portal management or Azure resource management. These are called tenants, accounts, and subscription. You have to start with these three things. Whenever you create your account, either using your personal email ID or using your organizational email ID, you will have to start with these three always. After creating the account and after exploring the Azure portal, you'll have to start with these three. Now, Azure has multiple services. You can call it as services, you can call it as resources or products. For example, we have Azure Vision, which is an AI service, Microsoft Foundry, which is also an AI service, Azure AI Language, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 or ADLS Gen 2, Azure Blob Storage, Azure SQL Database, Cosmos DB, etc. And these are known as either services or resources or products. You can use any one of the terminology to describe these things. Now, the first thing that comes is the tenant. Now, what is a tenant? Tenant is essentially an intra ID, which used to be Azure Active Directory. It can be your email ID or it can be your organizational email ID. In most of the cases, tenants are used in organizational landscape, but whenever you create your own account, the way I had shown you in the previous slide, even then a tenant is associated with your account. Then you have the account. So tenant is essentially for users, groups, resources, etc. But Azure account is nothing but a billing construct wherein you'll have to pay amount. So all your Azure resource amount would be associated with your Azure account. And this is the currency code in India. So your entire billing would be associated with the Azure account. Now, whenever we create an Azure account, a tenant is automatically created. I'll show you that how you can see the tenant. Using tenant, we typically create users, groups, and security policies, etc. But the billing is tied to an Azure account. Even for your organization, whatever email ID is used to create the tenant, that becomes your organization's Azure account. And under this, we have subscription. There can be one or more subscriptions for a single Azure account. And the way you can think of subscription is to demarcate line of businesses or demarcate your organization's environments like development, pre-prod, staging, prod, etc. So either one of them. Now, why do we have subscription? Because this is another way of grouping the bills. If you create, let's say, business-wide subscriptions, you'll know that which line of business is using how much amount of money or what is the spend for a particular line of business in your Azure account. And it is mostly useful in organization. In organizations, you'll always have multiple Azure subscriptions for a single Azure account. So let's say your organization has IT department, it has marketing department, HR department, finance department, etc. And all of them are using Azure for their front end or back end applications. So typically your organization or Azure admin would create multiple subscriptions so that the billing can be tracked or the resource spend can be tracked using these subscriptions. And under subscription, we create resource groups which are used to group similar resources. If you have, let's say, subscription based on line of business, then you'd like to have different environment for a particular line of business. Let's say the IT department. The IT department can have dev environment, staging environment, pre-prod and prod environment. So you can create multiple different resource groups for all those different environments. That is another way of grouping things together. So resource groups are used to group resources or services or products together logically. Then you have the resources, which are nothing but the Azure resources that I told you. It can be Azure SQL Database, Blob Storage, Azure VM, etc. On the tenant side, as I told you, that tenants are used to create users, groups, access policies, etc. Now let us go ahead and do the setup. We have already created the account. We'll go ahead and create subscriptions now, and then we'll create a resource groups. One call out here is that I'll not discuss pricing or resource pricing because you can get the pricing detail in Azure documentation. So that's why I do not want to spend time on pricing itself. So let us go ahead and create subscriptions and resource groups before we start working on Azure services or products.